The US election seemed all but over when Joe Biden's cognitive abilities had deteriorated so much that it seemed like an easy ride for Donald Trump to the White House. However, after Biden dropped out and endorsed Kamala Harris, who became the nominee, fortunes for the Democratic Party sharply rose and the GOP began to panic. The campaign went off to a flying start, exciting the base with energy and decisions such as appointing Tim Walz as the VP pick. It seemed as if it was over for Trump. But since then, there have been many instances from Team Harris that shows they may now be undermining their own campaign. The campaign has decided to gloat about how many Republicans have been endorsing Harris, and they've certainly pivoted from a more progressive style campaign to a more careful, centrist tone, going from strong rhetoric such as workers' rights and supporting unions to campaign slogans such as country before party, something Keir Starmer couldn't stop himself saying in the 2024 election. Now, I covered a story a while back where Labour right figures such as John Ashworth, we all know who he is because he's never off our TV boxes, him and many others of Labour together flew over to the US to help with the campaign. It has recently been revealed that the Democrats have actually taken advice from those that gave Labour a lower vote share, not just from 2017, but 2019, and a man who lost his seat to an independent. It has also been revealed that Labour together advised the Dems to be more hardline on immigration and to stop being so supportive of trans people. John Ashworth, chief executive of Labour Together and a former front bencher under Starmer until we lost a seat to a pro-Palestinian candidate in the biggest shock of the election, was also at the DNC in Chicago in August. He urged the Harris campaign not to hide from issues voters care about that the left normally finds difficult to address, such as illegal immigration. Labour also sought to neutralise talking points the right could weaponise. Ashworth warns his US comrades to develop solid responses on transgender issues after Labour colleagues faced repeated media questions about whether women can have penises. One of the things I was raising in Chicago was how that would become an issue if they weren't careful, Ashworth said. Now, we can see how the shift in the style of the campaign, went from being aggressive on the GOP, leaning into progressive messaging, to a more centre-right approach, and that's already having a negative effect on polling.
What is with all of this bedwetting among Democrats? Maybe it's an eternal problem, but let's take a look here. These are, of course, the Great Lake battleground states, the states we've been focusing in on. If Kamala Harris wins these three, she most likely gets to 270 electoral votes. Take a look 3 weeks ago. Harris was ahead by 2 in Pennsylvania, 2 in Wisconsin, 3 in Michigan. Look at where we are today. The race is even tighter than it was. Today, it's a 1-point advantage in Pennsylvania, 1 in Wisconsin, 1 in Michigan. Look, that's limited movement. But in a year in which this race has been so static, if we're talking 1-point movement, 1-point movement, 2-point movements, and we see movements in all three, this is the type of thing that, at least in the public polling, makes Democrats worried. And I think that the public polling in this case is reflected in some of that internal polling, some of that reporting that suggests that these Great Lake battleground states have certainly tightened a lot, where at this point they are way too close to call.
Finally, and probably the biggest mistake of the campaign, Kamala Harris, who at least in terms of rhetoric sounded marginally better than Joe Biden on the issue of Palestine at the beginning of her campaign, has shifted to the default position of standing by Israel no matter what. Now we have an example of this here. This is a clip of Harris responding to a question about whether the campaign is undermining its support for Arab Americans and Muslims.
How risky is it that you could lose the election?
Well, it is undeniable that it is something that everyone is aware of what is happening there. I speak publicly all the time about the fact that there are so many tragic stories coming from Gaza, and of course, the first in this phase of everything that has happened, the first most tragic story is October 7th. And what happened that day, and then what has happened since. And I think what's critically important as we look at this moment is, one, acknowledging the tragedy of what has happened in Gaza in terms of the extraordinary number of innocent Palestinians who have been killed, and taking that seriously and speaking truth about that. In addition, of course, to what I said about what happened on October 7 in terms of 1,200 innocent Israelis being slaughtered, women being horribly raped.
Now you can see this shocking double standard there. The question was on Palestine, and her response is, well, the number one issue, the most important thing is October 7th. Now, many people cite the figure 1,200 people were killed. Right. Well, I mean, 700 of them, some say, are civilians. We do know that Israel killed their own, including civilians and soldiers, using the Hannibal Directive. Um, Newspapers such as Haaretz have reported on that. But again, she's completely ignoring the north of 100,000 Palestinians that have been killed. She's also peddling the rape myth. Now, no one here is suggesting that no one committed rape on October 7th. However, we still have a lack of evidence for it, but we also have evidence for Israelis committing rape against Palestinians. There's even video footage, and they celebrated it. So, again, double standard. Rota, is Harris completely destroying her own campaign? I really want to get your thoughts on this.
I think this is complicated because I think honestly the apart from outside of certain communities, the Gaza issue is not top end. Unfortunately, what's polling in a opinion poll after opinion poll is like basic economics facts. And honestly, the biggest policy I would say that like is polling well for Kamala is like they want to extend Medicaid to have like in-home
A
what's the word,
very
care
good
workers and
policy,
stuff.
by the way.
Yeah, so like
Very good
really, yeah,
policy.
great policy. But okay, so this isn't a normal election because unfortunately Donald Trump is running again. And the big problem with this is they do not talk about the election like a normal election would be talked. There are no issues, conversations. It's just about like vibes. It's all vibes. And because of this, that means the conversation and every part of the election and the election itself will unfortunately be decided on vibes. And so even if Kemba came out with like all the greatest policies that you and I would ever love, it wouldn't really matter. And that it's very frustrating, I would say, as someone who cares about like good governance and policy. But because I would say like she changed the vibes of her campaign and this is coming back hard on her. And because Trump is doing like ridiculous stunts on the day and the news can't stop themselves from talking about it. I mean, like they've covered the McDonald's thing for a full 24 hours and it was like a completely staged event, which is so hilarious. But she did like 5 rallies, all like heavy duty on policy. It's not gonna go anywhere. And unfortunately, this is kind of the Hillary campaign in like many like aesthetic ways. Not in like an exact way, because she's doing much better and there's a better ground game, and I don't wanna put that much like shade on the campaign. They're doing like significantly better. But it's narratively falling into this like idea that like Trump is getting to do fun clown things, and that's good TV, and it is. And then she goes and does normal politician things and is unfortunately criticized for that. And then there is a very big real problem, which is a Gazan genocide happening right in the background. And unfortunately, a lot of people are seeing that also next to like weird Trump stuff. And that takes up all the space in a lot of people's heads. And this is all very dangerous for a campaign that's, like basically 50-50 at the moment. And this is not very good. Um, the other problem is like Democrats have to overperform in every single election because of gerrymandering and other quirks of the wonderful electoral college that was designed by the founders. Um, this creates a major problem with in like everywhere basically because if she doesn't have overperformance in all of the demographic groups they usually get good overperformance in, then she'll be hit. And this is where Gaza comes in because a few voters in a few places could really flip the entire election, and that is incredibly dangerous. And I think also I think the her not addressing the issue very well, or like the White House, Joe Biden. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, Joe Biden's still the president, and that's like the reality of the thing. Kamala could change her mind on this, and nothing would change if Joe Biden didn't want it to. Um, the other major issue is we have people who've become so frustrated because of Gaza that they want to basically. I've seen a lot of people discussing the idea that like America should suffer because not stopping the genocide, and that they should accelerate the situation. And unfortunately, they're falling into accelerationist lines of thinking, or even endorsing like voting Trump. And these are like really wild positions, but they either want to punish the Democrats, or they think like the people of the country should have to suffer in a way because of like penance. And I think this is an incredibly dangerous position, because Trump is incredibly worse on just Gaza, if that is the only issue you care about. He is bad on every other issue if you care about more than one thing. And that is, I think that's what has given me a lot of fear, because I do not see Kamala coming and fixing her stance on Gaza. And like, I can understand you watching that video, but for me, I just watched every politician give every both sides position on Israel Gaza since I was born. They're always like, oh yeah, yeah, this is thing, and then also this. And have I spoken the exact same amount of time for both of these? Cool, good. Let's go to the next question. And that's I've seen this my entire life. That was the most bland response you and normal response, unfortunately, that you see to every tragedy since my entire lifetime in Gaza. And that unfortunately sucks a lot. But that was probably the most normal part of the election, was watching that video right there, and that very vanilla response. So yeah. Uh
I mean, I wanted to discuss about obviously the threat of Trump and maybe the threat of Jill Stein, right, in a second. But I want to come back to the first thing you said, which is that there, you know, the issue of Gaza only appeals to a certain amount of people, and that's not essentially what you're saying. That's not an election decider. Um, so what, in
I,
your view, or
in Michigan, it is an election decider. Other places, I don't think so.
okay, um, okay, then what would you say was the real shift in sort of the campaign for Harris? I mean, I agree with you that it's not a policy led campaign. Of course, it isn't. Ask most people what their policies are. It's not. It's about Trump going to McDonald's or whatever. It's about, did Kamala Harris work at McDonald's? I understand that, but at the beginning of her campaign, there was a lot of energy from Harris, and I feel like you need to excite your base to generate that sort of energy. And when she was talking about, more progressive ideas, when she was talking about workers' rights and unions, when she was putting Tim Walz everywhere, and he was doing his amazing union speeches. Okay, that policy may not filter through to the entire electorate, but what it will do is sort of give activists on the ground that energy. It seems like the energy is gone. So I do personally think that maybe policy has something to do with it, but I'd like to get your insights on what you think the main thing is, which has shifted from sort of early campaign Harris to now, which is why it's looking a lot tighter than it is. Or do you think it's actually mostly on Trump's side and Harris hasn't done, quote unquote, that much wrong?
I don't even think it's that, like, because she's still doing like, well, like right before, an hour or two ago, like I watched like Waltz on the Daily Show from last night, and then like one of their rallies, and like they're doing all the same stuff, like it's the same rally. And I mean, like, and also they're like really about their stump speeches, so it's very much the same rally.
True.
But I don't know, maybe it's just doing a normal thing really well is not as cool as Donald Trump. I know it sounds stupid, but that's the only way I can wrap my head around it, because it's like the policies have not changed. Like the same stuff that was on her website when you and I were like amped in those first like couple of weeks. I think a couple things. So like one is like she couldn't let the like Gaza couldn't hang forever. We couldn't get a non-answer forever. People got pissy, and that like there was a little honeymoon, and that also was like during the newness of it. That ended, and pretty quick. I mean, like the advancement into Lebanon has really shifted things like a lot, because even if you didn't care about Palestinians, you might know a Lebanese person. And yeah, uh, so that I think has like dramatically shifted things around quite a lot. But at the other side, I would say there's more of a kind of feeling that the establishment Democratic kind of campaign committees have like lurched into action. Places like Center for American Progress and kind of like the Neera Tanden crowd, and they're a lot more conservative and dull on their approach to politics. Um, I don't know. It just felt like it was very spontaneous at the beginning, but that it was also because it literally was spontaneous. So it's like it's very hard to. It's not a normal campaign either. It's like a very short campaign, so it's very hard to say. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't have a good answer there.
I can almost see as well that there's a shift on the Republican side because, well, there's been multiple shifts actually. The first shift was Joe Biden dropping out, and it looked very good for Trump at the time. Joe Biden was not a viable candidate. When he dropped out and Kamala Harris took over, that was very good for the Democrats. And for a while, you essentially had the GOP just whining. Trump literally saying on TV, this is not fair, essentially. And it made him look bad. So I think they've shifted from, okay, let's stop whining about Joe Biden dropping out. It's not that they've let it go, and have focused more on just actually campaigning. I feel like there has been a shift there on the Republican side too.
Yeah. Also, I think I was looking at some polling data the other day for like likability scores across Vance and Trump and Walz and Kamala. So on October 2nd, almost exactly the date of the vice presidential debate, you see a dramatic uptick in Vance's likability, and it continues to ride up. It's still real negative, like people aren't loving him, but it's gone up by 10%. And I would say, like, if there was like one major screw up, it was normalizing him and Walls being unfortunately a good human and not being mean to the person in front of them. Yeah, and then they really kind of dropped stuff like the weird campaign because they wanted to appeal to Republicans. So you can't. I understand on like a logical level, you can't call Republicans weird and also say, "Could you please also vote for me?" It's a little
Mm.
disingenuous, but that was also part of the firing up the base because you had kind of like the openness to actually go and say, "Yeah, everyone kind of like Republicans are crazy, like they're wild, they're out of their heads, like they're so strange with these wild and weird beliefs." Um, and then it kind of became more you can't say that as much anymore, and that I think was a big mess up because if you're fighting a meme war, you need to fight in the meme wars. You can't not.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.